Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining this afternoon's session on how to run a digital process mapping workshop with myself, Chris Green from Skore. So in the next 30 minutes or so, the high-level plan is a little bit of an introduction to myself and Skore, very, very short. And then we're jumping into sort of what do we mean by a non-digital process workshop as opposed to a digital process workshop. I think it's quite important to set that foundation before we get too into the detail. We'll then have a quick look at actually a digital workshop in action. How does it look? How does it feel? Get some visuals on that. I'll include some tips and tricks and summarize a few tips and tricks on that as well. And then I'll be signposting you to further reading. And for those, just by way of introduction, my name is Chris Green. I'm one of the founders of Skore. I've been working in and around the process mapping management project space for over 20 years now. I'm not going to say the exact number, but in that time I've had the pleasure of working with all sorts of companies, some of the largest in the world, Sony, Nestle, Novartis, often banks and the like, right through to some of the smallest. Bit of a self-confessed process geek. I do love running process workshops. It's a bit of an addiction. And so that's what I want to hopefully sort of share a bit of my experience today. And of course, I'm part of Skore. Skore's a process mapping management platform used by all sorts of people, from transformation teams through to continuous improvement teams and ops and the like, all around understanding your processes and then making improvements off the back of that. So, firstly, let's talk about non-digital workshops, because believe it or not, this is still the norm. Even after the pandemic and the like, so people think that they've got to get people into a room. They use a heck of a lot of paper or a whiteboard or the like, but it typically ends up very post-it note heavy. And these are great sessions, but if we sort of step back and think about what goes into a non-digital, face-to-face process workshop, there's often travel by this very nature of getting many people into the same room. But especially these days, it's very rare that everyone's in the same office at the same time. So you've got to find a date when people can travel, and it might involve planes, trains, automobiles, hotels, and the like. And these sessions, because of the travel, they often take most of the day, because you want to maximise the effort and the investment in getting people into the same room. So you've got to put on lunch. You've got to find a room big enough. You've got to have the logistics in place to be able to host and run one of these sessions. And then at the end of the day, what happens? I mean, we've all been here. People take photos on their phones. They roll up the bits of paper, and then someone's got to go and take that away and translate that into a process tool. Making that assumption you do want to use a process tool of some description. Most of the time, it's a Visio or the like. So someone's got to transcribe those great discussions you had in the room, put it into some sort of digital format. And then what happens is typically they'll get emailed, maybe saved somewhere, but typically it's in people's inboxes. So then we start receiving feedback. People might scribble, print them out, and the like. And so you're getting that. You're doing your engagement post workshop in not a very efficient way. However, saying that, this is not beating up face-to-face non-digital workshops in the slightest, because they're great. You cannot beat, in terms of the question here, what are in-person workshops great for? Well, it's those making connections. It's those team forming and building and relationship building exercise, actually getting people face-to-face and having lunch together and debating and seeing the whites of people's eyes. You can't beat that by being face to face. So we're not denying that in the slightest. And so they're really useful. So again, bear this in mind when you are looking at how you want to engage and where you are in your project life cycle and your teams and those sorts of relationships. What do we mean by a digital process workshop? And this is, again, people have different views on this, and this is mine and a lot of people at Skore's view. For me, it's when you're mapping directly into a process tool. For me, that's what a digital process workshop is. So, and again, so there's a distinction there. So it's often remote, but not always. So again, in my career, I've had the pleasure of running 99% of my process workshops actually directly mapping into a tool of some description. Very rarely using brown paper post-it notes. Maybe in the early days, but definitely not in the recent years. And again, so they could be in person, use a projector. They could be remote, using Zoom, using Teams. The other point I'd put up here about what I would class as a digital process workshop is that the output goes into a process library. Yeah, and that's a general term, but it's going in and being shared through some sort of online repository where this content can be accessed, improved, and the like. So again, this is what we mean by this. This is my sort of high-level criteria of what we can mean by digital process workshop. So why consider digital process workshops? Well, let's break that down into a few areas. So they can be a lot more efficient. I mean, yeah, the no travel. You're not having to multiply the time up it is for people to get into a work, get into a single place, and sign out. You're not having to rekey something in, spend time tidying it up, and all the like. So typically, what we see is digital workshops are shorter. They're also a lot more focused, so you can have less people in them. Yeah, you might have a wider session first with more people in, but you can quite quickly have these 1-2 hour sessions, online or otherwise, focused around a particular scope, particular area of your process. So again, the efficiency of that process comes into play. We also see them being a lot more effective. So basic terms, what you're mapping in that workshop is what people will see. You might take it away, tidy it up and the like, but you're not having to translate post-it notes or scribbles from a whiteboard into a process and then validate it again. You're doing that in the workshop, and that's powerful on quite a few levels. Not goes back to the efficiency again, but people see it as a lot more tangible. It's a lot more real if they can see what's being created, and then when they come to review it or share it with someone else or reiterate it in the future, it's what they said, and you're also validating it at that time as you capture it. Also, if it's going into that process library, it's controlled. You're managing the change in that digital way, and it's kept up to date. Which again, most people have processes, but they struggle to find them, or they're out of date. And again, go back to that. It goes to trust. Do people trust what they're seeing if it's not up to date? So again, the effectiveness of processes is directly related to. You're also a lot more connected. So again, I might be making assumptions here, but if it's going into a process library, it's going to be easier to find. So it's going to be more connected to the people that need it when they need it. But also, I'm hoping you'd be linking it to the roles, the systems, the SAPs, requirements, change improvements, controls, all the other assets which are related to a business process. If it's going to the right place, it's connected. So making the most of that. So if you start a review in a digital workshop, you can see all the context, all the other information that you need to. Let's take a quick look. We can come back. Please do keep those questions. Please do pass on those questions as well as they come up. So let's have a technical look at in Skore, obviously. Right. So this is Skore. If you haven't seen Skore, it's very much designed to be used in a workshop environment first and foremost. So you'll notice it's simple. We've cleared a lot of the clutter around from the outside and trying to focus on what you're trying to do. I've taken an existing process here just to sort of introduce you. You can use a blank page. In fact, I prefer blank page starts in process workshops, but again, that's probably a different debate. But just to show you a bit of the language that we use something called universal process notation. We keep it simple for people. And you can see it's inputs, outputs, verb and noun activity, and who's doing it underneath. You can see we've got a little icon down here. I can drill down into more detail. So we're building up a hierarchy of processes. Using the same language. And you can see here we've got systems, we've got some attachments and the like. But let's create a new process off here. So I'm going to just say select vendor. I can create a new detailed process, which is just brought down here. So again, this is the common starting place for every process workshop. A blank page. The biggest, but when we onboard people, when we train people around the art of running process workshops, we talk about the 5 steps to the perfect process. I'll share a link at the end of this, and these are steps which have been honed over the years. And it's really about handrail for anyone facilitating a workshop to do. So what I'll do, we'll create a quick process, only 5 minutes at max, and I'll do it in the order of the 5 steps. And we can go from there. So the first step is to set the scope. So we're lucky we've drilled down on an existing hierarchy. So we've got our title, and I can bring my input, I can bring my output in. Okay. So if we didn't have that, if we're starting from truly a blank page, we'd spend a bit of time just defining what is it we're looking at today. Next thing we'll do is we'll look at the activities. Okay. This is a very simple process, very purposely chosen. So this is just a vendor selection process. So we can do that. We'll then just quite quickly go into shortcut keys again, because the tool should not be getting in the way of a process workshop. So again, whatever tool you're using, make sure we talk about flow an awful lot. You don't want people watching you struggle with the tool. It's all about the process, yeah. So we might say, well, we want to take those quotes and then we want to review them. That sounds fair enough, doesn't it? And then once we've got those quotes reviewed, there's probably going to be some sort of approval step, yeah. So we're going to approve, yeah. So we do that. So we put the activities, and they might be in sequence, they might not, and then we'd look at the outputs. Yeah, and again, these are the 5 steps. So again, is that our new vendor identified? Yes, that's our new identified, of course. And then we can start to look at the outputs. You know, a lot of processes and a lot of tools and a lot of post-it notes don't focus on this, but as a Skore, we put just as much emphasis on the outputs as we do of the activity. And what we find is it really challenges people's thinking. If they can't think of a good output for an activity, then why are you doing the activity? You know, it's as simple as that. So we're going to do that. So what we're going to do, we're going to say we've got our quotes received. Yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about this, but that's why we're doing that. Quite a simple step. We're going to review the quotes. Why do we do that? So, yeah, again, you'll have a good debate over this. So we want most suitable vendors identified, yeah. And again, at that point, you've got some great questions there. What is suitability? How many vendors are we talking about? And you might just add that as a note against the activity. So we might say we need to add criteria. So it might be regional. Where are they? Do they have a good carbon footprint? Whatever the criteria is, so you can say, add, and again, you can add your notes in here. And again, what is it? Is it the top 1? Is it the top 5? You can add all that information in as you're doing a workshop. Yeah. And if we need to check with someone, we can always bring in a note. We need to check with Joe. He's online. What we're doing there. So again, you're not mapping perfect processes. You're mapping the discussion that's going on in the room, hopefully at the speed of conversation. Okay. So we set our scope. We put some activities. We've challenged ourselves by thinking of those really, really good outputs. Then we can look at the flow and who does it. So we can say, right, we've got, what's our first activity? We need the quotes, don't we? Of course we do. What do we do once we do them? Oh, someone's going to review them. Perfect. Yeah. Once we've got the most suitable ones, what happens then? Someone approves them perfectly. Oh, and don't forget, we might reject. Yeah. Reject with comments. Perfect. Yeah. So we're adding it to each point. Things up, and I might say, okay, at this point, what happens there? Oh, it goes back to review. Okay, fine. Or there might be an extra step it comes back to. We might need to go and get further ones. But again, you're asking people very specifically what's going on. And then we can say who's doing it. All right. So who's going to request the quote? I've got a library in Skore already. So if I go procure, I'm going to say it's the procurement coordinator. If it wasn't there, I could quickly create it there. And again, at this point as well, you might be looking at what system is someone doing? What are we doing it? And actually, we've got a low-code app that's specific for that. Perfect. Again, you just quickly go through and do that. So is it who's going to do that? Well, it's the procurement coordinator again. That's fine, but they're doing it in conjunction with the account manager. I'm making this up as we go along, as you can tell. But again, you're asking at each point. And again, if there's a system, you can add that. If you want to apply RACI or roles and responsibilities, again, you can do that. More interestingly, we get to the approved vendors. Again, who's doing this? We can say actually the finance director's going to do that. And again, you might add criteria on here, or levels, or whatever it might be. Or if this was a more complex process, which it often is in terms of something like an approval, guess what? We can create another detailed view of doing that. But we map one level at a time, drill down, and keep people on the same page. So, and again, the what else is quite a broad statement about what we can connect, but we can connect anything to your here digitally. There's an email template, a form, a link to a system, a link to another process, an improvement opportunity, whatever it is that we want to do. That connected piece. If it's going into a proper process tool, you're going to be able to enrich your processes in the workshop or after it with this information. Brilliant. So every process workshop I've ever run is a variation of what I've just shown you, be it a complex high level, be it a very detailed system flow. It's this approach, and it's done me good over the years, I'll tell you. So the other beauty about putting it into that process library is that it's under version control, and I can share it straight away with people. Yeah, so I often tell people, you can be looking at this by the time you get back at your desk if you're using a projector, or if you're, and not just look at it, but we can come in and we can create comments. Yeah, so I can, as any user, I can create a comment. I can say, what is it? I've got a question. How many can be on the short list? Yeah. Perfect. I can add that new comment in. I can even assign it to someone, or just go to the process owner here. I can even pin it to the thing here. So again, we're getting that back to the efficiency. We're getting that feedback. Joe can come in and add a comment onto here that's like, I think it should be 5, or actually it only works if it's 2, or whatever it might be. And you can start to do that engagement through the platform. And again, we're not having to translate from a whiteboard or from a photo. It's there, it's real, it's effective straight away. This is always a challenging question for me when people say, well, just summarize your top tips and tricks. So I've been doing it for 20 plus years, and these change week by week in terms of which ones I'll put at the top. So I will signpost you to other information where we maybe go through a few more of these. But my first and foremost is very, very simple. It's using a simple common language. I'm a process. It sounds a bit grandiose, process expert. I've been using processes for quite a while. That doesn't mean the people that I'm trying to understand processes with, they understand as well. So again, keep it simple, not just for yourself, but for all the people that are going to touch this process in its life cycle. We use universal process notation. We've got lots of information about why and how we use that. There are others out there, so whichever one you choose, just keep it simple. Don't introduce shapes and icons and colors unless you really have to, because it will degrade the potency of your processes in the future. The other one is, you saw me introduce the hierarchy, and again, this is really where I see people fall into traps, is where you go too detailed too quickly. You want to get to the detail, of course you do, yeah, but actually doing that higher level contextual process to then drill into the detail, especially if you are doing them remotely, they can be shorter. You can it's a different group of people that would be getting that end to end, as opposed to the audience that you need to get the detail. Yeah, so there's lots of benefits of doing it this way, but again, get that context, then drill down, and then you can get into as much detail as you wish when the time is right. And then keep the session short. We all have a short attention span. Hopefully I'm within your attention span in this 20-30 minute session, but people will degrade over time. Their attention spans will degrade. So for me, a process workshop is an hour and a half, 2 hours max with a break. It's that sort of thing. You can always set up more work sessions afterwards, but keep people focused, and people will thank you for it, immensely, and they'll thank you by coming back to the next one, or when you reach out saying, I've got questions about this one, can I grab you for 30 minutes? You can always get more time, but keep those sessions short. Yeah, it's not a badge of honor by having a 4-hour workshop. It really isn't. Yeah. And then agree housekeeping rules. I know it sounds maybe too simple, this one, but actually, set your rules up. Say what it is. If it's videos on, if that's how you want it. If you want to focus and not do emails and the like, tell them, remind them, at each point, take breaks and all that sort of stuff. So don't be shy about reminding people at the beginning of workshops what we're here for, and those rules that are going to keep us on this. If they need to reply to an email, if they need to phone that customer, whatever it might be, great. We can all take a break, come back in 5 minutes, and we'll get focused again. It's too easy for people, especially remotely, to tune out, and you need to make sure you keep them focused. So in summary, I think we're doing pretty good for time. We've got some time for questions if you want to come off mute, or I'll put them in the chat. So going digital can make your processes workshops more effective. Yeah, so you can do effective and efficient means you can do a hell of a lot more in the time that you've got. Yeah, and if most of the people we talk to, they've got all the time in the world. If they're facilitating workshops, it's getting access to the SMEs, the subject matter experts, or the people they need to go and talk to, because they're busy, they're running a business, they're dealing with the problems you're there to help them fix. So if you can do something in an hour, which would normally take 3 or 4, they're going to love you for it. Yeah, and then you'll get more time from them. So again, you can do more with that. and then more connected. The end goal is to create this architecture, this model, this asset, which is fully linked up, and then it helps you start to get those insights and to answer the questions that the business is asking themselves. So the offer, it's quite a simple offer as we do. It's a free 1 hour workshop. Yeah. So obviously for the first 5 businesses that reach out, so either reach myself, one of the team, or in the chat here. But if you can get the SMEs, the subject matter experts, if you can define the scope in terms of what process you want to look at, we'll give you a rocket booster of a head start on that. Yeah, and we love doing this. So it'll be an honour for us to sit down, show you what this can look like, give you a real taster with one of your processes, and you can take that away and do what you like with that. But that's an open offer for anyone on this workshop, or if they're watching the recording because they couldn't make it. Get in there quick, because these sorts of offers don't hang around for long, unfortunately, because they are quite popular. I'm assuming you're on this call because you do have an interest in process and process workshops. So a bit of homework or a bit of extra reading. We've got a wealth of information over our channels. You can't stop us talking about this, so we do share what we can. So there's a couple of articles at the top there about how to run a process mapping workshop. Again, building on what we've been talking about here, but we've got more time to do that. Everything from a workshop agenda. Some people like to pick that up and use that and tailor it to you, to their business. We've got quite a few videos on our YouTube channel, even one titled Running Process Workshops. There's even one on there which is comparing remote versus in-person digital workshops as well. So we'll come some tips and tricks around that. And then the 5 steps to the perfect process, it's downloadable PDF. We share these links afterwards as well. But go and take that, use it. It really is as I said before, that handrail that you can use in your process workshops. So thanks for attending, everyone. I've got time to answer any questions if you've got them. I can see one on chat. I'll pick up in a second. So, and again, if you want to find out more about Skore, what we do, you've got all these. We're everywhere in terms of socials and the like. And of course, if you're curious to know more, you've got a particular use case or experience you want to share, we love talking about process and everything around that. Please do reach out to us. So we had a question here: is there an ideal number of people you should run digital workshops with? That's a common question. People want to know that most like I say, it depends. You can get an awful lot out of a workshop with one person. Yeah, and often they're quicker. But really, I think the ideal number is about 3 or 4 people. I think if you set the scope right, you might have a larger session in the beginning, with 7, 8, 9 people to get that top level, and I agree with that. But once you start to bite size it down into the ones, it's normally 3 or 4 people. I would say make sure you've got someone who's empowered to make decisions in that process workshop. Yeah, because otherwise you're going to come out with more questions than answers. But yeah, 3 or 4 is quite a kind of nice number, and there's always reasons why you might have more or less. But that's kind of in terms of getting that cadence, making sure everyone's got a voice in an hour and a half or 2 hours. That's pretty much the sweet spot. Any more questions from anyone else? You put your hands up if you want to have a. Oh, actually, I'm looking at the chat, and we've got a couple of Q&A. There you go. That's me not using Zoom. Brilliant. So, what is the ideal size of the group to do? We just had that question twice. Perfect. Obviously, a common question. So, in a second one, if you ran multiple workshops and mapped 150 processes, what would be an ideal naming convention? Brilliant. So most people are mapping processes for a reason. So it depends on what that reason is. It could be a system implementation, it could be a real project, it could be an automation exercise. So that would kind of probably dictate a few of the buckets that you're mapping in. What I would suggest, we'd have to talk about it in more detail, unfortunately, to sort of give you a head start. But do have a convention, even if it's a simple one, because like I say, if you're talking hundreds of processes, it will soon quickly to get out of control. You also want to tie that to a good folder structure in terms of how buckets you're doing it in. That will help dictate what the naming convention is, but also people being able to find them. And then also what I suggest if you are having large numbers of processes like that is set other attributes like a purpose, and maybe some other tags or anything, some other way of being able for someone to come in and find a process. Because if you've got 150 processes, I'm guessing you've got variations in there, regional or otherwise. and the like. So so it's a combination of, and again, when we onboard a customer, a lot of the advice we give, it's not how to use a tool, it's how to architect your process library, because that's a common question. Yeah, great. It's okay when I've got a dozen, but what if I've got 10 times that? How do I make sure we keep our processes as effective and findable and the like? And we're pretty good at that. So for situations, great question. So for situations where there are not separate conditions for process step input output, so just a combination, John, there in terms of I've shown you a very simple exercise, but this is going to be very complex processes that you need to map, and it might not be as simple as inputs outputs. There's a few things you want to consider when you're doing this. Is you do want to try and keep it as simple as possible. So if there's lots of different conditions and a lot of different variations or different types of this process, choose one and map that out. Yeah. So if it's like, we've got 50 different sales processes depending on the product type. Yeah. Well, okay, we'll pick one, map it out, and then look at the other types. And normally that you'll end up, it's not 50, it's a couple of different ways. And you can start, you can then start to, in notes or attachments, say which criteria do we go down there. Yeah, that's it really is. So try and distill it down, pick one use case, and then build the complexity on top. And often it's not as complex as you realise, and you can always, capture that information in another way. I've not yet found a process I haven't been able to process map. That's if you can take up the free offer, that's a challenge. Yeah, but there are tricks and techniques to sort of really break it down into simple building blocks. So always break it down, and then you can always build the complexity back in, but you'll layer it in a way which still makes it readable. Yeah. As I said, we're an open door. If you want to talk about this, or if we've touched on a topic in this session that you want to explore further or get our advice, we are an approachable bunch. We love talking about it, so please do reach out. Always happy to have a conversation. Please do follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and the like. You'll get any more sessions like this we're doing, and any sort of content we're sharing. But no, thank you for your time.